volunteers who they kind of do have a nice strategy, and I kind of want to model the rest of the content. When I say content, I mean like nodes that aren't forums and issues, So, what was the question?
Well, just to talk about that, it's
okay.
Is there? Do you need people to help with that? Is there? I mean, it's obviously a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. I think that the most important thing is at this stage is finding out what people need from the site, so that we're basically planning to meet people's needs. So finding documentation is one, but also like people who are new to Drupal want to find out what it can do, and they don't necessarily need to go with documentation for that because that's far too advanced and technical. They need a more kind of a step back, and so one thing about is like, what if there was like screencasts, but it's like who's gonna make them? So it's kind of a interesting time right now. So don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but there's so many like on groups. There's several different working groups that are being talking about groups that learn. Okay, well, so we have some organizing groups there, and the community initiatives page can talk about that as well.
I don't think I talked about the community initiatives, but we could come back to it. So reviewing content that's somewhat similar, but it's also sort of the forums is a great example of this. There's spam in there. Like this is almost a simple way to at least give something back if you want to just help even just a little bit, or maybe on part-time or something. It's reviewing, just marking stuff as spam. At least you can't very easily mark it as spam, but you can report spam posts and spam users pretty easily. And also there's a team that works to review news posts, whether that's a site, how a site was built, or maybe that's an announcement about DrupalCon or something like that. There's a team that reads that content and just makes sure that that makes sense. So similar to writing user guides, there's just providing user support. And the forums, as crazy as they are, there's thousands of people that are asking a lot of questions in there. And sometimes they're duplicate questions, sometimes they're really, really tough ones that are actually hard to solve. But there's a user, very misunderstood, I think is his username. And Grid, do you know, like, could you say a little bit about that person?
I don't really know much about him as a person. I guess
Sure.
what I know is that he's just ridiculously on top of every single forum post it seems on Drupal.org. Like when I search for stuff on Drupal.org, it's the rare post that doesn't have his name somewhere providing advice to people, trying to help people out. And he, I think in part because he is writing so much, he tends to be a little bit curt, but he's always got like the best link to answer the question or something like that.
He's also
really amazing.
He's also very active in IRC in the Drupal support channel.
Right.
Yeah, Ken VN.
Yeah. He's pretty crazy.
So Lindsay mentioned the IRC channel. So for like real-time questions, people are asking stuff in IRC, and so there's #Drupal and then #Drupal-support are great places to both ask questions but also answer people that are curious of problems like immediately. And Stack Exchange is becoming a really popular one as well. And the Drupal part of it is drupal.stackexchange.com. So we talked about translation, so this is another great area. There's a large initiative for Drupal 8 to make it easier to write translations for core and feature modules and such. If you speak another language really well, or is interested in helping out in some of these areas, that's another great place. And it's as simple as like translating the interface text sometimes. Like this button that says submit, does that make sense to somebody in another language? Perhaps it's a better word for that. There's also this idea of issue queue farming. So the issue queue is similar to the forums. Like there's a lot of good and bad content in there. It's like it can be very crazy. And one of the problems is the people just coming on and submitting their bug without doing any searching at all to see if there's somebody else that reported that bug. So whether you're submitting an issue or just sort of trying to help out a module, you can look for duplicates and mark certain issues as duplicates to sort of clean up the issue queue and help like a project that's very important to you that maybe you're using on the site. Get through these issues. So, for example, like Views has, I don't know how many issues, but has a team of people that just do issue queue farming in a sense. So they just go through and mark duplicates and close ones that are invalid and help to like reduce this large amount of issues to actually valid ones, whether they're bug reports or feature requests or something similar. So jumping a little bit to talking a little bit more about the products, what can you do to contribute back in that way? So a lot of that's code related, but some of it's certainly configuration. So on kind of in both realms, code and configuration, there's confirming and documenting bugs. So perhaps you found a bug, or you're just trying to help out a module again. You could, if somebody posted a issue report about a bug, you could double check if the steps to replicate it makes sense, and if it can be reproduced and something that is actually a valid bug. And then there's reviewing and testing patches, as was mentioned earlier. So this is a great place. There's so many patches that are in state of need for review. So that's something that somebody has fixed a bug or provided a feature, and now they're just looking to make sure that it works for everybody else. So you can just come along, download the patch, apply it, and make sure that it meets the requirements that the issue states. There's also a relatively new one with the sandbox projects, and it's sort of changing the workflow that projects get moved from sandbox to full applications. And you can actually review those applications to make sure that the people who are writing modules or themes are following best practices, they're not duplicating another module or theme, and that it's something that's, well, not necessarily worthwhile to provide, but it's just not duplicating, not disallowing or ignoring best practices. So Scott has been really involved in this area. So I'm going to put another person on the spot, 2 thumbs, to talk about this process.
So I'm not sure what else to talk about. To become a new contributor, well, anyone can create sandbox projects on Drupal.org, which is a new change, which is awesome because you don't have to go through any hoops to become a contributor. To create full projects, you have to still jump through some hoops, which are unfortunately necessary so that we don't have insecure code or confusing projects all over on Drupal.org. So what we do to stem the tide is the full project review queue, which is overwhelmed and could definitely use more reviewers. There's some very simple steps to the review process, and there's some more involved steps to the review process. Simple steps involve just like looking at the project and making sure it has a understandable name and description, which I think just about anyone can do. And the more complex steps involve like making sure there aren't any security holes or any other major code level problems. So that's a way that people can get involved that they will be thanked enormously for.
And you've done some analysis of like the number of projects, your applications and sandbox projects too. There's been an explosion of them.
Yeah, that's tangentially related to not all sandbox projects get submitted for full reviews. The sandbox, I think by the end of the year we'll have, so Drupal.org is like coming on 10 years old now. Is that right?
Sounds about right. I'm not sure when.
So, oh yeah, okay. So, I think by the end of the year we'll have more sandbox projects than we have full projects, which will be only a year of sandbox projects versus like 11 years of full projects. So sandbox projects are growing really quickly, which is great that we have all of these new people, but it's not going to be long before many of them are thinking, I want to turn this into a full project, and we don't currently have the capacity to do reviews very quickly at all.
Yeah.
So that's a big need in Drupal.org.
So I think there's a link to, there's a groups.drupal.org group for how to review project applications. I believe it's at that URL. So part of getting a sandbox project is just submitting your code, which is under the category of developing modules or themes for Drupal. And so one obvious way to contribute is writing patches or modules or themes. And there's a link for just writing, if you're interested in writing themes. So that other fourth category was just helping other people join. And I think an event like this is obviously a great one, ideally to try and get people excited and motivated and interested in contributing, but also there's a lot of different ways that happens. There's meetups and code sprints that happened a few days. This week there was some code sprints happening. Conferences like Drupal Camp or DrupalCon, or even just other meetups if they're outside of Drupal, other web related or business related meetups. And then got a couple slides about things not to do. And it's not so much not to do, but it's almost another reason why, like why you should still be motivated to. One of them is not sitting on your idea. So there's this quote again from Frank earlier about like how submitting these blog posts and getting these ideas out there allow you to refine them and make them better. And certainly if you have some bit of code that maybe it's not complete, it fits your use case, but it doesn't fit everybody else's. If you still got it out there, whether you got the idea out there or you got some of the code itself, then people know that you were working on this problem and they can help you solve it, or maybe they can see how it will help them solve part of their problem. Maybe they also are just interested in reviewing some code, whether it's a new application or any of these things, but it's just start getting it out there in some form. It doesn't have to be the code right away. It could just be an idea. And then here's another quote that I pulled that I like from Gregos that he said, "Nobody joins an open source project because they really enjoy reminding other people to do work." And there's kind of the flip side of that, in talking a lot with Lindsay today. We join because we want to make better software, we want to be stronger together, we want to solve these problems, like we can do them better together. This is the big category of like big link to getting involved is I think it's drupal.org/getting-involved, but that will just jump over to it in the slides. So that's all that I've prepared, and so I was hoping that we could talk like, do you have ideas, do you have things that you want to contribute, or do you have reasons why you're not, that you're still unsure what you can do or why you even should? Feel free to share them. Or even just questions, like if you're not sure how a sandbox project works or something like that.
There's one of the Drupal Commerce guys did a series of screencasts, and that was extremely helpful. So that may be something people can do, is just to do a screencast of setting up a view or setting up something, how to do taxonomy, and put those out there. And they can be very useful for someone, particularly a beginner or stuck on a certain configuration, just seeing it. It's nice.
Yeah, was that, so was Commerce Guys? Maybe that,
Randy Fay, right? He's done some of that.
So that, that product is still being built, so he's almost testing out stuff on different screencasts.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredibly useful when,
So what else? Are there ideas or questions or anything you want to share?
Well, I guess a question for the room, for those folks who, how many people feel like they are contributors? You're part of the we that's the contributors that Angie was talking about today? Yeah. So for folks who didn't raise their hands, like anybody want to offer up some of the reasons that you feel like why you haven't done it? I think Ben touched on a lot of them, but maybe he didn't quite get all of them. What are some other things? And this is maybe perhaps a bit ironic because one of the things that might be holding you back is being shy about being in front of a group of people. So we're trying to find those folks whose reason is not shyness, or who's ready to break out of that shyness in this room, which is totally the trust tree.
Welcome.
I know nothing.
So it's the note. It's you feel like lack of experience is holding you back, or just that you haven't had the opportunity yet?
I just actually downloaded Drupal for the first time today, so yeah, I mean I have no inclination of what I'm doing, so that's why I'm here. Hopefully maybe I can pick something up. So.
If you think you might be interested, I want to maybe do some usability testing, like see, like have you looked at the website and find out like where you think you would go to compute, if that's okay. Like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
See, you can
anybody
go
else?
from downloading to contributing in the same day.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What else?
I can say, just hearing Angie this morning and then being in this group too, just hearing how to do it is helpful and inspiring, and certainly it's kind of the push I think people might need.
Yeah.
So things like this, more things like this would be great
Sure.
at every conference or camp.
I think that's interesting because at Chicago there was a contributing to Drupal. So similar talk, and one of the questions was, why are there not more people here? And I don't, the presenters didn't have an answer to that, but it's.
Well, I was at DrupalCon and I didn't go to it. And I went to all the opening talks in the morning, and they never really got into it as much, I guess. I didn't consider it at the time, or I didn't feel like it was all that. Like Angie this morning, I thought was inspiring, and then when I saw this, I was like, oh, I'd like to learn more. So.
I have a question about, we both work with Civic Actions, and so, as a professional services firm, I think we always intend to contribute, like, there's definitely a culture of contribute, but it feels like you're on to the next project. And so how do you build that in? Do you have it formally built into the way you structure your projects, or how do you?
I mean, hopefully some other people would like to speak about this too, if there's different ways, but what we do is, so for our hourly rate that we're billing, we just have 20% that's available. Out of that goes back to then being available to contribute back. So for every 10 hours that I work, then I'm going to fail the math right now, it's higher, but you know what I mean. 20% of it can work on modules or can help work on an event like this or something. So it's very explicit in our model.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit more details there, one thing we do is we pay everybody hourly, which is not a very common thing for companies to do. But I think that's important because there are a lot of companies in the world that say, we have 20% time. But you can say that as a policy, and yet when people have stuff to get done, their manager is saying, we gotta get this done by Friday. Right. And so that 20% time just disappears. And so by paying people hourly, we know very specifically how many hours they've got, and it builds up just like vacation time accrues. And so if you say, you know what, next month, let's try not to do any sales for me, and that will be my month to catch up on my community time.
That was going to be my question, is like, okay, you've got this bucket, when do you ever get to use it?
Seriously, yeah.
It's smart.
Yeah. It's kind of, I mean, it's a pain to some extent to have to track that time, but we have to track it because we also bill clients hourly. We don't do fixed bid, and so we have to know that information for billing clients. So.
Yeah. I think there's also a tendency to feel, like a lot of times on projects we are doing things that we would like to contribute back, but there's sort of a feeling like, ooh, I have to go back and clean that up before I can get it out there. And maybe we need to change the culture so that we're not so gotta clean it up and we just get it out there.
I think one key thing if you're a development shop, and I'm for the development shops that are in here, I think it's the case for all of them, that one baseline for contributing is just if you're changing a module, submit it back as a patch. If you see documentation that's wrong, just fix it. I mean, if you do it within the core, what I would say is like, so for us, every patch we have is an issue. Like we don't change something unless it goes into a patch, and that goes to a page on Drupal.org. The idea being you don't want to, it's a benefit to the client to not own that code. Yeah. Owning their own forked version of a module doesn't help them at all, and just hurts them in the long term. So by keeping things patched and having an issue, hopefully that fix will get in, and then just by keeping your sort of work environments closely aligned with that sort of thing will get you more involved in other things that just interest you, and makes it easier, I think, to open those other doors. Because I think if you have to like totally switch up from working on client stuff to working in the community, it can be a sort of jarring thing, and maybe you need to just have days off just for that. But I think as a company, one of the big things that we do is we just really stress that this stuff should be going on. If it's going on in the modules code, it needs to go on Drupal.org. And of course we have developers that don't want to do that, who don't want to put something out until it's finished. Well, you know what? It's never going to be finished. So just friggin' release the thing and worry about it later. Put an alpha stamp on it, and if somebody else wants to pick it up and do something with it, they can. I mean, and the other thing is that you can be sure that you're, you mentioned like cleaning it up. Well, probably that means that maybe there's some things in there that maybe you shouldn't have done. I mean, a lot of times that's not true. I mean, there's a lot of logic that you don't want in that you hard code into modules for speed that you wouldn't want in generic modules. So but I think the key thing is just trying to convince them, just release it. Like, who cares? Nobody's really going through, especially once you get past Scott and the sort of sandbox level, and nobody's stopping you from releasing anything, and you just have to put your warnings on it, make sure there's no security bugs, but you should just really it's just a habit thing.
I think there's a really great metaphor for that, which is ants building anthills. And the process that ants go through is they pick up a ball of dirt and they inject it with pheromones and then they leave it somewhere. And like you're thinking, okay, this is a little ant and he just leaves this ball of dirt and pheromones on the ground and who cares? But then a bunch of other ants are attracted to that and eventually they build a 6-foot tall anthill out of it. And so like we're open source isn't standing on the shoulders of giants, it's standing on a giant pile of midgets. And we're just like, we're building these tiny little things, and by adding together little dirt balls of pheromones, I'm gonna mix my metaphors here, we eventually get to these really awesome things like Drupal. So if you say, oh, I gotta polish this before I get it out, but like, no, it's just one tiny little ball of pheromones and dirt, and it's gonna be okay. Somebody else will build on it, and it creates the nexus of an awesome thing.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be afraid, like, in writing, it's like the red pen, you know what I mean? Like, you can't be afraid of the red pen. You're gonna have to get your stuff critiqued and edited, and that's how you grow. I mean, so you just have to put it out there, and if it's trash, people will trash it, and if it's worth something, someone will fix it. And, you know, it happens all the time, though. We put out stuff, we're like, I don't know who the heck is gonna really use this. And then you're like, what, 500 sites are using this? What the heck are these sites doing? But, yeah, I mean, you just never know. And also just, you know, getting yourself into the habit of, you know, I don't believe in trusting anybody, let alone myself. And nobody should trust themselves too much. So it's like opening yourself up, like, oh, well, this is what I think, but is that, you know, it gives you validation for what you think.
And on Drupal.org, if you like see something that's not documented or you want to correct it, like just do it, because everything's revisioned on Drupal.org. So if you like want to make some changes to some documentation, do it. And you know, that's how it gets done, basically.
Is there a methods or approach channel? So sort of not a technical channel, not a support channel, but how would I do X?
And that's mostly what Drupal is for, right? I mean, just sort of general questions.
No, but more of a problem solving, sort of 10-foot level, you know, when you're perceiving how to actually come at a difficult technical requirement, and there's 3 different methods you can think of. Is there a channel that you can go to that?
Maybe the developer list?
Well, and a lot of times local meetups are good for those types of problems. If you present the problem that you're having at a local meetup, and you have the ability to find people that are willing to help you.
So IRC maybe.
IRC is a good one if you've got a local channel. I don't know where you're
But nothing's
thematic. No, but if it's thematic, like if you're having a 10-foot problem with views, and you're looking at different ways of dealing with it, there's a views developer group. Or
I'm talking about more when you're doing, like, you're tying together 5 modules already and you're trying to solve something with the client.
it sounds like what you want to support. So maybe Drupal support is the
He wants to know the one true way.
There is no one true way.
It's hard with such a flexible system, and I noticed that not a lot of people is willing to say this is the one true way, go this way. You know, it's just, I guess it's hard because I mean that is what Drupal is, right? A whole bunch of pieces thrown somewhere.
Yeah, there's more than one way to build a tower from later on. So.
There usually is a more correct way, though. So usually when you get an answer, you won't get the one right way to do it, but you'll get suggestions on the better way.
Right. And also Stack Exchange is something Ben put up there. I would consider putting it up there, see if someone will answer. I mean, you never know.
What else? I'm just saying over here because I don't want to like direct anything anymore. You know, it's like let's just talk about this, like what are the problems and all that. Anything else? Anybody else? If not, that's okay too.
Yes, I'll say something. I do a lot of work where I'm customizing, you know, the various modules that are already out there, and sometimes that work improves a module, but a lot of times it's just so littered with, you know, it's an override module basically, so it's not a patch that we're really doing because we're wanting to keep that module, you know, be able to update it and everything. So building sort of overrides, sometimes I end up doing things that really might help the actual module, but there's no I guess it would be tricky to convince the client to put any budget, you know, who's paying me hourly to do these tasks, any budget toward moving that into a patch, you know, the good things that might help out.
But why? I mean, they're gonna pay for that code. If you're just
Well, they're paying to make the code, but they're not gonna pay me to sit around and, you know, make
the
a patch.
point is, when
you know.
when you wanna keep that up to date, if
Yeah.
they want something else to happen, they own that code.
Yeah.
Right? The community owns the rest of the code. If you get them to push it, if it gets upstream, you no longer have to maintain your override. Now it's just part of the normal thing that you could do away with that code and you're lowered your client's technology debt long term because there's not a custom thing sitting there waiting for that API on that module that it's overriding to change and break your thing. I mean,
Yeah,
you
well,
wanna get it.
yeah, I can see that. All right.
And you wanna get it in so that, I mean, it depends if you're working with clients long term, it's gonna be your problem maintaining it. I mean, that's one of the main reasons we did it. We just ended up maintaining people's sites for a long time and it's just really annoying.
It's easier to get it in there.
Right.
I think one of the challenges is that a lot of clients aren't in the mindset of understanding what open source really is.
Yeah.
And that they're still in this proprietary mode in their brains.
Yeah.
And to get them to understand that giving the code back to the community greatly increases the possibility, A, that their code will be improved upon, B, it'll be maintained, is really important. I think it needs to be communicated from the beginning. I think that when clients at the very beginning of a relationship start to get a sense of what open source really means, I think that that it helps a whole lot in continuing that relationship.
I think one thing is when I write code for a client, often it's a low budget and you're trying to get something out.
Well, yeah.
And you hardwire things, but if you put it out there, maybe somebody will say, hey, I can put tokens in there and it can be extended and you can add more features into it. And then, or maybe I put something in there that's a security bug because I was trying to do it too fast. So you put it out there and somebody takes that and then improves it, and that comes back to your client in the next upgrade. And suddenly they have something that really can make
So
their site
marketing
better.
to them is if, you know, okay, you can start this, you know, it's going to grow, in the future you're gonna get more out of it, it's return on investment then, I guess. So, yeah, I don't know.
You might think of it as this might just be a way to influence your, or it might be something that influences the way you talk about how much that thing costs. And I don't know, we don't need to go into details necessarily, but I mean, a lot of time, in my experience, a lot of time the client doesn't know what that piece is gonna cost until you tell them what you think it's gonna cost. And so you have a choice. Do you tell them the cheapest, sloppiest way we can get there at some breakneck speed, or why not start by saying this is the best way we can grade this? And you don't necessarily have to go the long route, although I suggest it. You don't necessarily have to take them all the way into drinking the Kool-Aid and saying, let's make the community better on my very tight budget. But just present the best way forward, or at least a better way that leads towards sustainability.
Or maybe a way to represent the cost of doing it sloppy is what it's gonna cost you to maintain it in the future. Too, like,
And I don't know,
it's the short-term cost.
sloppy isn't really what it
No,
feels
I'm
like.
not.
Let's do it sloppy.
I started working with Drupal, there was sloppiness,
Yeah,
you know, and
no,
there's a
I'm
lot
not.
of ways to go wrong. But I guess what it ends up being is there are a lot of times where I feel like as a developer, you know, okay, this is universal, what I'm doing right here, and this would really help that project. But there is no budget, and the client feels a little ownership over that customization too. So I feel like, and I think you're right, saying it at the beginning, you know, why don't we do it this way, and, you know, budget a little bit to put this back in, you know, any pieces that we do in this project that seem relevant to other contributed modules, that, you know.
In my experience, you may have a totally different, I know there are people that do it differently, but in my experience, I wouldn't even say, oh, and here's the extra bit that you're gonna pay me to put it back in the community. This is what it costs.
Use lump
all of it, right?
And to build on top of that, you know, that goes back to your personal development style and technique. If you are following a proper structure that's being supported by the community, you're using something like Git, so you have the ability to isolate your particular change that you want to give back that is universal because you've been regularly committing your code in your repository, and you have the ability to isolate that one bit that isn't client specific, that does help the community, and because you're following proper coding practices already, it's trivial to kick that back to the issue.
Okay. One small thing, I mean, is there anyone in here who doesn't have a Drupal.org account? Anyone? Yeah, so one small thing is just like you were asking, where do you ask questions? Well, the first place is in the issue queue, and really that's how you start to build your, even if you don't do development, if you have questions, put it in the issue queue, join groups.drupal.org, you know, post questions there, just take part, start to create that little trail, and just, you know, you get better at development, you can go into that, or at the very least, you know, you can say, hey, I have a problem, is this a normal problem? That's how things get, you know, a lot of times problems exist in Office because nobody's reported it, right? Like nobody came into the situation in that sort of way, and there's no way that they appreciate that report back. So just, you know, even if you just come online and you say, I have a problem doing something, or you search through the forum, search through the issues and don't find something, add a new issue. Just make sure you get an account and just when you have questions, just post them in an issue and don't worry about if people are snappy at you. Everybody's snappy online. And there's lots of people that will help you, even if they are snappy.
I'd like to go back to that one thing. I haven't found it, but I'm interested in. Rata is, so the way we were talking about it initially was chunk A is the pure development time, and chunk B is the contribution time. And you're asking a client to pay for chunk A and B, right? And it's tough. Like they might have some light connection to chunk B, which is the contribution that we all are here talking about. But that doesn't really help them immediately, and when they're just looking at a budget, it's hard to prioritize that. It's hard to choose that. But instead, if it's all chunk A, and the added benefit, the extra mile is the contribution, you know, on top of what this costs to do this right and to be maintainable and all this stuff, it actually helps make Drupal better. And it helps, you know, and you can go into all that nice kind of, from the client's perspective, maybe really fluffy and kind of pie in the sky. But if that's built in already, and that's this added thing, add this additional benefit, it's just a totally different perspective. And I think you can get, in my experience, you can get clients, or prospective clients, really excited about the contribution aspect when they don't see it as this thing they have to pay more to do, when that's just the way you do things. Right?
Yeah, great point.
Makes me sound like a really good
I think that's time. I don't know, do